Baby M cars frolicking in the sun. And this is the newest Baby M, the M2. It's the cheapest high-performance BMW, and it probably should be the least desirable. But there's something about them hips. Well, 71mm of extra girth over an M240, actually. It's 64mm wider at the front, too. Stronger, lighter wheel carriers work with better suspension components, and it also gets the clever variable locking differential from the F80 M3. The motor is an N55 3.6 rated at 370 horsepower and 343 foot-pounds, with 369 available on overboost. It shares some trick internals with the M3, and it uses just one turbocharger. In summary, yum yum.
It is so easy to accuse the M2 of not being a proper M car because it does, like the 1M, have a fairly ordinary based engine. This time it's called the N55. That's the N54 in the 1M. And that means that this has pretty much the same swept capacity. So the block and the head are quite similar. This is direct injection, and it has a single sort of twin scrolly turbo, so it's variable vanes. The idea is that it can do with one turbo what the 1M can do with two turbos. So you end up with 370 horsepower and about 343 foot-pounds of torque, pushing something that's a fair bit under 1,600 kilograms. The package is pretty potent, and of course being turbocharged, every time you put your foot down in gear, roll-on performance, as I rather annoyingly like to call it, is really quite good. It gives you the impression that you have a lot more than you really do. Does that mean it's gutless at the top end? No. It means the thing just feels rampantly fast the whole time. I think it's a really good engine, and I love the manual transmission. I think I definitely would have a manual in my M2. But the reason for this comparison is that I still think the 1M is a sensational little car. I think it's got a spirit to it, a kind of pugnacious punchiness that BMW hasn't managed to repeat for quite some time. And I always hoped that this would be the car that would do that. And in many ways, you know what? It does. It feels so special. It feels short, small, wieldy. And even though it's dried out a bit now, some of the exterior shots you'll see were shot when it was wet. This thing is leery. Turn the systems off and you have every chance of having a large accident. And that's what this car should be all about. It's fantastic. I suppose the beauty of having your own video show is you can kind of choose which videos you want to make. So this isn't objective, because I don't think 1M and M2 prospective owners are in the same camp. One's a bit of a collector's car now, this is a new everyday car, this M2. But the differences are quite interesting. For example, drive them back to back, and whereas I thought the M2's electric steering was a really good job, in fact better than the M3 M4 Coupe, it feels quite inert at the front compared to the 1. That's got a lovely hydraulic assisted rack, and it just feels so direct. And even though I don't like the word feel, I feel more connected in that car at the front than I do. I also feel it turns quicker. It's got a quicker ratio, the 1M, so the whole car just feels up on its toes and more nervous, but also more agile because it's got a shorter wheelbase and the wider tracks. There's an anger about that car that's missing in this one. This, on the other hand, counters by being much, much more enjoyable on a long journey and less nervous. It also does this quite well. It's a proper M car, it really is, and you can just fling it about. I think it's less angry. When you put the power in and go into the slide, the M2 is much more predictable, it's less spiky. That torque reaction gives you a nicer transition into a slide, and you can, this is quite quick now, so you can really throw this thing in at, what's that, 90 odd miles an hour, big smoky one. Yeah, proper car. What are these things now in sterling? 50 something thousand pounds. Some people are saying it's too expensive given it's an ordinary BMW engine. It's not, it's a proper M car. Oh, I love this car. It is fan-dabby-doozy. What do you think about the way they look? Do you prefer this one or the one? I'm not sure. Oh, look, there's a third gear slide. Let's forget about the looks. Oh, yes. It's just such a compelling recipe, isn't it? Small-bodied car, short wheelbase, widen the tracks, insert big motor, keep manual gearbox, keep people like me that whinge about the onwards creep of automised everything very, very happy indeed, because this is just a great car. It really is. I love it. I think it's fantastic. It's quite a difficult car to pigeonhole, the M2, because it's not really a Golf R rival. It's too much. It's too expensive, and it's too exciting, and it's too rear-wheel drive. It's not really a Focus RS rival. What is it? I suppose to understand the M2, you sort of need to know where it came from, don't you? And that means I think you need to drive it back to back against one of these.
I think I can drive the black one now.
I first drove a BMW 1M in 2011 and I thought it was sensational. I still think it's sensational now. It really is such a special little car. This was a skunk works project. It was a bunch of engineers that said they wanted to do something, but there wasn't the time or the resource to do it in a conventional fashion, so they went and did it at weekends, and it has that feel of being a bit naughty. So they took an N54 twin turbocharged 3-litre straight six out of a 135i, lightened the flywheel, and then put it in the most fantastic, sporty, wide body shell. The result is one of the naughtiest cars I've ever driven. It's not the fastest, but it has just got this personality of wanting to be a bit troublesome. And I have to say, cards on the table, this is mine. I bought one because I think they're so special. I had to have one. Prices seem to be a bit silly at the moment, but so what? It really is worth every single penny. And I've been a bit naughty with this one because I've put a full Krapovich exhaust on it, which is titanium and gorgeous, and I've had it remapped. So in a straight line, we're going to find out in a little bit whether it's quicker than the M2. But the chassis on this thing is so extraordinary. It's so angry. Second gear, come into a hairpin. And it goes so quickly. That initial movement into oversteer is a snap, and I love that. Combination of E92 M3 differential, manual gearbox, very short wheelbase, very wide tracks, means this is a very, very exciting car, but it's snappy and it's lively, and we knew it at the time. And I still don't think there's anything much spikier on sale today. Certainly not the M2. Tellingly, I love the steering in this car as well. The steering is just better. It's more direct. I just feel connected in a way I don't in the M2. And the speed and the power delivery, well, do you know what? The engine feels a bit freer revving. That might be because of the lightened flywheel. And this feels a bit pokier, but then I have played with it a bit, so I can't really say. I think in standard form, an M2 has the legs of an M1. Sorry, a 1M. Of course, the etymology of 1M is quite interesting, isn't it? It's the only M car that has the number before the letter, because the M1 is the original BMW supercar from 1979, and BMW felt that out of respect it couldn't kind of usurp that name for a little two-door small saloon car. What I do know is it's just got an M badge on the boot, and I love the way it drives.
And that's because it's a special little car. Sitting on a weeny wheelbase with big flared arches, it has 335 horsepower and the same 369 foot-pounds of torque as the M2, but all the time, not as overboost. The differential is from the E92 M3, as is most of the rear suspension assembly and the brakes. In fact, it's easier to view the 1M as an E92 M3 chassis wedged under a widened 1 Series body with a lightly breathed on 135 motor under the bonnet, or hood, depending on where you live.
There's no doubting that this differential doesn't feel as sophisticated as the one that's fitted to the M2, so the traction in this car is more confused, more inconsistent. Sometimes it really hooks up and goes on these super sport Michelin. Other times it kind of spins one wheel, other times it snaps you sideways. And this does feel a properly old school driving experience. It may only be 5 years old, but it might as well be mid-80s. To me, this is big turbocharging. This is, dare I say it, a modern-day Sierra Cosworth. I love that. It's angry, it's dangerous. It's not especially competent, not especially fast. Golf R will leave this thing for dead in British conditions, but I don't care. Golf R can't do that.
Ready when you are.
Okay, bit of science then. Litchfield Stage 1 tune on my 1M with an Akrapovic exhaust all the way through. That's an M2. 3, 2, 1, go! Yes! It's got the legs on it, hasn't it? But you know what? When they were standard, or when this was standard, that would have the legs on this. In fairness. I feel quite smug though. Love it when toys do well. Now, you might have seen a couple of weeks ago on the internet that RM Auctions was dealing with a sale of around 130 cars from the 70s, 80s and 90s, and I saw the pictures of those cars in that warehouse and thought, I've got to see them. Guess where we are? We're with them. This is, and I don't say this lightly, the most extraordinary room full of cars I've ever seen. I don't have the stats, but I think if you looked at my browser history for used cars, more time will be spent looking at used Bmw M cars, Alpinas, AMGs, that kind of stuff than anything else. Those are the cars that for some reason I can't get enough of. And I've just walked into a room, well, Alpina, mint. Mint, that's a B7 turbo, mint. That looks like a 635 CSI, probably an M6. E60 M5 in Europe, paddles, remember that? Big outcry, journalists like me saying it didn't have a manual gearbox like the old E39, but these ones, well, in America they did a 6-speed manual for a while. They're both manuals over here in Europe. I wasn't aware of any others in Europe. I mean, that's special. Opens door, inside, stick. Look at the seat bolster on that car. You show me an E60 M5 doesn't have a collapsed driver's seat bolster. They all do. This one doesn't. Like everything else here, it's absolutely mint. There are three E38 Alpina 7 Series here. There's a 6 litre, a 5.7, another 6 litre. I've wanted one of these ever since I first drove one in 2001. The only place I've ever seen more than one of these was, I think, the Geneva Motor Show. And I think even then they only had 2. There are 3 here. And then you're just drunk on E38s and you think, well, what's behind? Oh, look, there's an E28 Mint B7 Turbo. I've not seen one of those in the raw before. So just stay there while I have a bit of a man moment to myself. Right there. And breathe in. Okay, right. So this is an E28 with the cloth bucket seats. I mean, look at them. They're just perfect. Look at the steering wheel. Fellow sad people, what's the first thing you do when you approach an old BMW? You look in the boot for the toolkit, don't you? So let's just choose one. This is a 635 CSI. Come here. Come on, Nilo. Pop the boot. Up it goes. Look inside. Undo, undo, undo. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Look. A screwdriver. Why are all the spoilers so good? My spoiler's not as good as that. All the rubber's just right and it's not perished.
Lexus's fast car history is curious. Its first, the ISF, was actually a decent stab at irritating the BMW M3. Its most recent, however, the RCF, was mostly terrible. In between came the LFA supercar, which is still one of the most desirable machines I've ever driven. This is the new GSF, Lexus's answer to the big fast saloon question. It costs over £70,000, and this one is very blue.
But before you assess any very fast, large saloon car, you have to roll out the M5, because let's face it, the M5 is the daddy. The whole class is named after the M5. It's called the M5 class. So first of all, let's go for a stroll in the 30th anniversary M5 and find out just what the best, fast German saloon car is all about. Well, it has such a colossal numbers advantage, you wonder why the GSF even bothers to turn up at the race. We've got nearly 600 horsepower here. I mean, that's, a hot hatchback more than the Lexus has. We've got adaptive damping, we've got alterable steering weight, we've got a totally configurable car, we've got a larger body with more space, we've got more grip from wider tyres, and we've just got more of anything. This is a numbers fest. It is the ultimate expression of the rear-wheel drive German very large saloon car, and it is, in the most part, very, very good. However, I'm now going to drive to the bottom of a really good Welsh road and then drive back up it and tell you what it's like to drive fast, because in some ways it's surprisingly good, but in others I'm finding it a bit of a pain in the arse today.
If a standard F10 M5 is already a very punchy set of numbers, this 30th anniversary special takes things a step further. That means 600 horsepower from a 4.4 litre twin-turbo V8 and 516 foot-pounds of torque. It's 50 kilograms shy of 2 tons, and with the optional driver's package will do 190 miles an hour, and that's still limited. You get some forged 20-inch rims, matte paint and ceramic discs, taking the price to over £90,000. Ouch!
Now for my configuration, I've gone longest throttle, comfort dampers and the lightest steering. I might just go the steering one more, so that's the middle steering. But there's a theme here. I slacken everything off in this car and make it as soft as possible. It has effectively the competition pack suspension on it, and it's still, on a Welsh A road, way too stiff for me. That's the problem. That's why it's being a bit of pain in my backside, because it's got so much power and torque, there you go, airborne at 60 miles an hour, that it just can't get it onto the road. So the point I'm making here is that, yes, it's great the M5's got 600 horsepower, it's an absurd number, and when it does get all of it onto the road, the feeling of acceleration is outrageous. But the number of times it can actually do it without something a little bit scary happening and or the traction control light flashing are so limited that the Lexus's power output seems to be more sensible. In fact, what I'm getting at here is that the Lexus's power and torque figures really do work much more sensibly with the available grip from its rear axle. The M5's just got too much power and torque for what it can put down on a day like today on a road like this. You could argue, well, live somewhere hotter and find a wider road that's better surface. Yes, but you can't always have that, can you? The other thing is, the stiff suspension slightly ruins the steering for me as well. The steering's a bit over light and not really with me, and I get a lot of chatter and kickback through the rack because everything's so stiff. But the gearbox is magnificent. The engine itself is magnificent. Twin turbocharged, and it revs as high as the Lexus's normally aspirated motor. And once it is hooked up, it is so damn fast in a straight line, I think it's 911 turbo fast. What a magnificent thing. And of course, I love the way it looks on the outside, I love the cabin, driving position's excellent. It is the all-round package. But I had expected the chassis to be a little bit better, and for the wheels to not look like they were bought from Rip Speed. Otherwise, the M5 is a superlative motor vehicle. I can't think of many cars that would suffer more on a limited test drive, like a 1 hour out the showroom and back test drive, than the Lexus GSF, because it just takes so long to reveal its quite considerable personality.
Under that Predator-esque mug lies a 5-litre 470 horsepower atmospheric V8 with just 391 foot-pounds of torque. It weighs less than the M5 at 1,865 kilograms, and this model's suspension is way simpler too. No fancy adjustable dampers, just a fixed Sachs shocker.
This car is totally unconventional. It's quite unlike the conventional sports saloon out of Germany. The controls are all different, the way it drives is different, what it offers is different. And when you first get in it, you think, yes, This is completely rubbish. But you have to persevere. If you give up at that point, you will just walk away and say to yourself, yep, it's not very fast, it's not as good looking, and it's not as impressive as any of the German cars in this class. But if you stay with it, I think there's a bit of a treat in store, because I've spent some time in this car and I'm really enjoying it. Let's start with the driving position. It is absolutely spot on and has one of the best seats of any car I've driven in the last 5 years. It's supportive and super comfortable, and I feel right in the centre of the vehicle. It's a strange thing to describe, but the driving position of a car is something that's so often overlooked, and Lexus has absolutely nailed it with this one. Then there's the engine. Okay, it doesn't have any of the big bombastic, hey, look at the size of my willy numbers that the German cars have, but it's normally aspirated. How many normally aspirated engines are there left in fast cars? Audi R8, Lamborghini Huracan, same car, this one, and not many others. That's something to be celebrated. And this one, it absolutely screams. It feels like it's revving to about 9, it isn't, it's going to about 7.5. But it's a complete event, and it reminds you why we all love normally aspirated engines. I just think it's a complete and utter tonic.
Everything about the Lexus is less headlinier, and those weird Lexus exhaust tips still make my teeth raunch. Brakes are steel and 380mm up front. The 19-inch rims and tyres are also smaller than the BMWs. The gearbox is a torque converter auto, not a DCT.
I'm going to configure my Lexus, but I've only got one thing here, so I can go to normal or economy, sport and sport plus. I don't like sport plus, I'm going to go to sport, and I can have a manual option on the gearbox. But unlike the BMW, this gearbox is an automatic with a manual function, whereas that one is a dual clutch. So, first off, no great torque, but oh yes, that is a spectacular engine. And I've got no adaptive dampers, and I've got no choice of damping at all. I've just got one setting, and over this road, it's better than the BMW. Whatever you say. I know you can take that competition pack off the BMW, but right now, I'd rather be in the Lexus in terms of its ride and handling compromise. Quite important in the car, that. Steering. I prefer the steering rack in this car. It's got none of the kickback and none of the fidget, and I feel more confident when I turn the car. That turn moment, I can judge better in this car. And the whole body just feels a bit smaller, so I can place it better. The visibility is better out of the car. I'm sounding a bit, I know, consumer journalist, but just bear with me. We're not going sideways today. I get told off for that the whole time. Now, this engine is a joy. It's got a proper step as well. At about 3.5, where's the step? Yeah, about 3.6, it comes on cam. The VTEC boys will love it. At about 3.6, the intake noise hardens, and then it just scoots all the way up to the limiter, and you pull the paddle and hit another gear. The gear change, even in the fastest mode, is not fast enough. Isn't a patch on the BMWs, and on downshifts it's a bit slow, and sometimes the rev match is not great. So the gearbox is weak, it has to be said. But if you enjoy driving fast saloon cars and you owned an E39 M5, I think you might prefer this over the new M5. And as for the way the power and torque work with the grip available, on a wet British road, it's just a more enjoyable thing to drive because you don't have to constantly worry about the traction. I drive it with the traction control off. It's wonderful. It's got loads of grip from those sticky Michelins. It doesn't like this cold weather quite so much. The brake pedal is really good. I've not had any fade yet from the brakes. Everything about it and the way it goes down a road is so much better than the RCF thing they launched a couple of years ago. This is an infinitely better vehicle than that, and it's got a really special personality that I said grows on you, and I'm enjoying that more and more. However, we then get to the thorny issue of the cabin. I want to talk you through this cabin because I think it might be the craziest car cabin on sale at the moment. Genuinely, I have to stop and do it stationary, because if I try and do it moving along, there's a chance I'll crash. I need to start the engine for this so that you can see the full madness of this cabin. It really is like the inside of someone's head. First of all, the steering wheel, which has a load of buttons. I don't know what they do. This one here is the volume for the radio. there's a mode button in the middle, and then there's a whole load of stuff going on the dashboard. There's an up and down here for a menu, but there's also a square one here that's got up, down, side to side for a menu, and another one in the middle that's, I don't know what that's for. There's a back button, another menu button here. That's your radar cruise, and that's your lane departure warning. That's your Voicetronic to give voice commands, and there's a phone on and off there. I can't fathom them because there's two sets of menus going on here. This is all electronic inside here. I'll have a look at a close-up now. It's beautiful. It's quite LFA-esque in the way they've put it together, which is really cool. I love some of the detail and design. I love the way the sort of a tungsten look to the surrounds of the dials, and the small speedometer is quite aero. It's really cool. Indicators are on the right side, given this is a Japanese car. And the windscreen wipers work completely counterintuitively the wrong way around. The paddles feel like they're from a cheap gaming steering wheel. So this is actually, in GSF terms, quite conventional, if a little baffling. However, let's get down here to the full madness. On this hump here, there's a sort of rectangular or an oblong thing that moves you around your menu system here, and I have no idea quite how it works. There's an up-down button there that I still don't understand what that does. There's a main menu which will get you through to your, everything from climate to your media input or your CD player, which is, by the way, this hole in the dashboard here. You can access your heater controls from there, but they're all repeated here. They do this lovely roll up and down thing as well when you go up and down. It's very pretty. Ergonomically, it's a total disaster, because you're controlling stuff here, and then you've got stuff to do on the steering wheel here, and everything overlaps. It's totally counterintuitive, and best of all, the navigation won't recognise postcodes. It is a total disaster. However, it looks fantastic, and it feels brilliant, and I just think it's wonderfully, wonderfully crazy. The gear lever, for example, the detents to make it move are the wrong way compared to any other gear lever, so you find yourself constantly fighting against the resistance point. 3-point turns take about 10 minutes because you're wrestling with this lever. It's got quite a storage space. You can, hide stuff. At every point, someone's gone, I know what, let's just stick it there because it might look cool. I quite like the single-mindedness of just doing it the way they want to do it. And then there's the cabin materials. Count the number of different materials in this place. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I can count 10 different materials here. In the BMW, I think there are 3. It's an absolute mess, but rather a wonderful mess. It's even got exposed fake Allen bolt heads here that go into the Alcantara that hold that on the dashboard. It's insane.
Normally, when BMW adds a competition badge to an M car, it needlessly ruins the suspension and adds some ugliness to the wheels. But with the M2 Competition, it has done something different, something better. Because the M2 Competition actually gets a new engine. The S55 unit from the M3 is now wedged in there, and you even get the funky carbon strut brace. You also get a new chassis, new brakes, and a decent percentage of a new cabin. You now have 410 horsepower and 405 foot-pounds of torque. Big increases on the old car, but you also get an extra 55 kilograms. But BMW loves its traditions, so it's added some uglier wheels just to stay faithful to the competition heritage.
Did you have a good summer holiday? I did, but the way to get back into work is the new BMW M2 Competition. Now, it looks like BMW has very kindly given us an M2 with an M3 power plant, but it's not quite as simple as that, because the old M2 engine was killed off by the latest emission regulations. So either the M2 had to die, or BMW had to bolt this engine in. So we get a load more power, a bit more torque, but we get some more weight as well. And that's the thing I'm a bit sniffy about. The power to weight ratio of this car isn't that much better than a normal M2. So let's see what it's like on the circuit. The last M2 was always quite a handful. What have we got here then? We're at Clermont-Ferrand, which is one of the great circuits. Not been here before, have no idea why I didn't know about it, because it's superb. The elevation changes are amazing. Gearbox, DCT in this one. It's really, really sharp. I reckon the shifts are that much quicker. A little bit of rain coming down at the moment, so I'm losing a bit of traction. Engine pulls like a horse. Doesn't feel quite as angry as it does in the M3. And for me, there's always been a personality about the M2 that was missing in the M3, and it comes from that short wheelbase. The car just changes direction so aggressively, but it also feels a little bit spiky. There's an element of danger, like it's a 2002 turbo, if you know what I mean. And I love that about these things. Balance is good. We've got a little bit of understeer in the middle of the corner, and we've got oversteer coming out really as much as you want. Let's just demonstrate that. Here we go. So we get on the gas, and we get a little bit of that coming out. There you go. Armfuls if you want it. Very controllable, typical BMW. Cabin, I quite like these new instruments. They've got a sort of new M5 style instrument pack in there that looks quite funky and technical. Brakes, very good. I'd say the brakes actually are quite a standout for this. This car still doesn't have the agility of a Cayman, but what I like is that even though it's a complete yobber when you want to be, far more of a yob actually than the Cayman, it can now carve the straight line a load more than it could. So it's a fast car. It really is a fast car. If you wanted something to run every day, do the occasional bit of track work, I would never have advised the last M2. It wasn't up to the job. This one certainly is. As tested, this car, steel brakes, fairly normal spec inside, is £49,000. That's an awful lot for a 2 Series base car, but I don't know what else will do this for the money. Of course, the main competition for the M2 really is a used M3, isn't it? You can pick one of those up for about 40 grand. So would you have a used M3 or an M2? I think my money's on the M2 Competition. There's something about this. It's quite spiky, it's quite good fun. There's a personality here that I really, really enjoy. Yeah, I'm taking one of these. Let's do a bit of slidey stuff here. Look at this. Why is it that BMW's engineers just know how to make cars feel super, super settled when they slide? It's partly the way they let them go all the way to the limits of grip, and the tyre never gets really spiky. The drop off in grip is always consistent. Also the power steering. The electric power steering on this car is a bit lifeless. However, it stays consistent, the assistance, all the way to the lock stops. There you go. Some really useful consumer information. This circuit, wow, what a place. Yeah, there is a bit of deadness to the steering, you know. It is just a little bit lifeless, but I don't know. All steering systems tend to be like that. Seating position, still a bit too high for me. I don't know why BMW are into that these days, but they seem to be. Oh, what a thing. Oh, it's slippery there, Nilo. Yeah, slippery today. It's slippery today. Hold on to the wheel, Chris.